It's been a real pleasure to get to know these gentlemen. We've done a couple of calls just to prepare for this session, and if only I had recorded those sessions, there was some fantastic podcast material. So what I'm hoping is we'll be able to unlock some of the amazing insights and journeys that they've been on. So we've got some great questions for these guys. We also have a lot of questions for you. Well, not that many, but there's a few questions for you. If you get them wrong, you will be staying up late after to make up for getting them wrong. And just to hold your attention, so listen carefully. My first question for you, before I even get to these guys, is really to help them understand you as an audience and where you are in your journey, in your relationship with skills, and specifically using solutions like Eightfold in your organization. So I need you to practice your arm movements when I'm going to use voting by hand. For those people who haven't quite ventured into skills but are researching it for their organization, so we haven't really started, but we're researching. So again, this is helpful, and I can see two hands. Please make sure your hand is really high. So this is really helpful, right? Now, you guys will want to speak to the people who are currently planning. So who's currently planning to implement but hasn't implemented at all so far? Okay, so again, put your hands up because it's nice to see from the front where you're at. And then we're into the next phase, which is who is actively implementing at this moment in time? Okay, again, put your hands up. Now, what's interesting is for those people who are planning and those people who were researching, these are some of the people you want to speak to. The other thing is, my final question is, who is either sustaining or relaunching their Eightfold implementation? Again, put your hand up if you are in that phase of sustaining or relaunching. Again, put it nice and high so other people can identify you, because there's almost a story for everyone in networking at the next moment of those people who are researching, you saw the hands that went up after you, and then each part of those stages, you can go and find those people. There's a few people at the front who are a little bit further in that journey. So, I've used up too much time already. We've only got 35 minutes, and I've used 3 minutes already. But the question really, I think, is to give you a sense of where these guys have been and their context, so you can get a sense of their journey as well. And Jan, just maybe we've started with you, and I need to put my reading glasses on. Tell us about you and your organization and your drivers, because I think the context really sets the scene for your approach. So why is skills intelligence important for your organization in your context?
Yeah, no, very good question. So just to set the stage, I lead the global talent management function for Amgen, which is a biopharma company of about 25,000 people. And one of the key things, and we've heard it in the panel earlier for us that we were working on, is this concept of how do I grow and develop my career while employed at Amgen. This is a consistent point of feedback for us during our sort of regular listening. It also comes in exits, although sort of hopefully not too many. And so we knew that we have a platform to deal with. And we also had some examples consistent with our development philosophy that sort of said, well, learning by doing is the best way of learning. And so we were looking for a way to connect people with development opportunities. And so we've implemented through Eightfold a project marketplace where we can democratize access to key initiatives from the standpoint of people who want to participate in those, but we also make it easier to staff key projects for managers in that way. That was our selling point, that was our key problem statement, and this is where skills, right, help us kind of make the connection or be the breadcrumbs that makes the connection between a person, their development needs, and the opportunities for develop that there are. We've been consistently talking about the fact that the best way to plan your development and plan your career movement is to start or begin with the end in mind, have a role, have a sort of direction that you want to go into, and understand what makes a standout candidate in that role, and then check your profile against it. Skills are a really good and really useful language to operationalize this concept, and we see that sort of a solution that uses that language has a really positive reaction from employees.
So in your context, the skills are really driving or the basis for trying to create a learning culture where learning happens through doing, learning happens through work, through placement, and that opens up a whole lot of opportunity.
And it also helps you put a focus to your development, because one of the reasons that when we double click on why do you not feel like you're getting development and growth, if you don't know where you're developing for or what you're developing towards, then it's very difficult to know whether you're happy about it or not.
Yeah. Now, Sri, you've got a very different starting point around skills than these two guys,
Absolutely.
right? And so it'd be really nice if you could give us a sense of, so what's your context, what's your role, and why is that skills intelligence important to your organization?
Yeah. So we are in professional services business, and our core of the business is we buy skills and sell skills in form of solutions. And I head global people supply chain management. Ashutosh recommended not to use people, he told me to use it, skill supply chain management. So today I will talk about skill supply chain management. So what we do is, how do you really, we have two horizons in skill supply chain. One is the demand planning. How do you plan my demand for next 2 years? We call strategic demand planning. Next few quarters to meet the revenue target, I call it as operational demand planning. And tactical, that means now how many demands I have, and how many of them are fulfilled, how many of them are not fulfilled, and what's the revenue leakage I have. So I need to understand the entire demand side today using 4 dimensions. That's the subject of my supply chain. One is the skill. The will. Will is how many people are engaged in the assignment or in the solution or in the client. The third one is the task. What kind of activities they do in the job, and the time. How much time they spend on different activity. So we are re-engineering the skill, will, task, and time as a subject matter of my skill supply chain management or people supply chain management. So once I understand the demand side of it, I need to ensure that this is met through the supply network planning. The supply network planning have 2 dimensions. One is internal supply. How do I reskill, cross-skill, and upskill people for the future demand? As well as the external, that is recruitment. So today we started very differently with Eightfold. When I listen to other stories, we started in internal supply chain management with Eightfold. We are not using Eightfold for recruitment yet. So here we are working on skill taxonomy, ontology, and skill inventory of our people. Now we are working with Eightfold. How do you understand the demand and match internally? And how do you really understand future workload? And how the future workload is going to change, and what are the skills implications? Then how can I fulfill skill internally rather than going and hiring? Of course, we are debating using Eightfold for recruitment also, but today my focus is on internal. So the last comment, when I do the skill supply chain management, the important dimension for us is how do you really measure profitability per employee? So every employee brings revenue in terms of skill rate card, and how do you really ensure that that skill rate card is met through minimum possible cost? So if I increase the skill of people and get the revenue associated with that in future and reduce the cost, then my profitability increased. So how can I reskill a person from .NET to ServiceNow? .NET may be $10, ServiceNow is $30. And how can you do that? So we work on 2 things with the Eightfold. We started, one is managing entire skill supply chain management, and another one is labor economics. We call it as profitability per employee. How can we manage it through internal fulfillment? That's where we are.
So there's a real strong commercial focus.
Absolutely.
An operational, almost people optimization. How do we get the most value on a sustaining trajectory, right? Not just about today, but tomorrow.
And since we are focusing on not only skill is from a workload called task, and time and will also equally important. So 2 metrics I monitor as a supply chain head. One is profitability per employee. Second one is how do I convert employee experience into customer experience and drive greater revenue and margin for the firm. So the monetization of employee experience, and another one is how do I really manage the profitability per employee. The last comment, when I started this journey, I find 70 to 80% of the labor economics come from intangibles, not from tangibles like compensation, pyramid, years of experience. It comes from intangibles like skill. Skill is an intangible. And employee experience, career growth, reskilling. All this is very important. That's one of the topic of generative AI, work on content, not on quantitative, it's work on qualitative metrics.
Yeah. But, and I think what's been fascinating about having the conversation, as you can tell already, is the sense of different starting point of different organizations. And Alistair, again, yours is slightly different, but you're on, again, a slightly different trajectory, but also heading to that same sort of center point of skills being part of the power of that.
That's correct. And at Cisco, so to set some context, employee base of around just under 80,000, but we've been on the skill journey for, I'd say, at least the last 5 years. We've tried things that have worked. We've tried things, some of that hasn't worked, but it's given us learnings. The main driver for bringing Eightfold in is really to enable the planning, movement, and also supporting hiring at Cisco. And we think about planning, it's workforce planning at scale.
Yeah.
Right? If we think about the hiring, it's looking at both internal, external, but also that internal mobility, right? And I think from the hiring perspective as well, it's about how do we improve that candidate experience, that employee experience when they're going through that hiring process. So being proactive in terms of opportunities that may match to individuals rather than then having to go and find that.
So really different starting points. And I said I have some questions again for you. If we went through each one of these, who is most like where your journey is again? So those people who are maybe more like Jan and where you've starting your journey, who are starting maybe from that people development perspective, please put your hand up so we can see where you are. So there's a smaller number. And maybe from the talent acquisition side and recruiting side, whose starting point is more in that space? Okay. And then finally on this sort of workforce optimization, is anybody playing in that? Cool. So we almost have already some subgroups where you could get together in a huddle after the session. But I think that gives us a good sense of context. And it's important to sort of bear that sort of sense in mind of who's got what sort of stories they're on. So what we want to sort of dig into a little bit next is this sense of how do you get the solution off the ground? And Sri, sort of, what's been the most important factors for you when you sort of wanted to get the solution moving? What's been the critical factors in driving adoption and sort of delivering success? Has it been about doing pilots, big bang?
Yeah.
How did you go about that, and what have you learned on the way?
Yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned, we are in the business of buying skills, developing skills, and selling skills in terms of solution. So one thing for us very, very important is to have a skill taxonomy. That's what we worked on last 2 years. And we try to do it internally and through subject matter experts coming in. Then soon we realized with generative AI coming in, no SME is required to define the taxonomy. There are taxonomy exist in the world like Eightfold. So now we are in the process of adopting Eightfold taxonomy. The second phase is taking a skill ontology. Ontology means relationship between skills. What is the adjacency skill for data science? It is data analyst or software engineer or systems analyst. So adjacency skill is so important for developing. The third one is how do you take an inventory of skills? So I have taxonomy, I know ontology. Then we need to take inventory of existing skills of the people. Again, Eightfold we are using for taking the inventory. As we take the inventory, we are also building use cases on taxonomy, ontology, and inventory. That means unless we cannot go waterfall. For example, today we are 30% adoption of skill inventory. We recently rolled out. But I started immediately. Out of the 30%, what are the use cases for reskilling, cross-skilling, and upskilling? What are the economics around reskilling, like .NET to ServiceNow, Java to Hybris? What are the economics, and what are the benefits we are getting? So we are in the form of collecting the data on skills and building use cases, right from workforce planning, recruitment, onboarding, skill-based compensation, skill-based incentive, reskilling, cross-skilling, upskilling, and skill retention, which skill we need to retain, we cannot afford. We call good attrition, bad attrition analysis and everything. So that's where we are into.
And are you doing that on a global basis?
Yeah, we are doing it in a global, but we are piloting a lot in our delivery organization.
Sure.
You really look at our backbone of our business is delivery. How do you really acquire skills and deliver to the clients in form of solution? The focus is the skill-based life cycle, and I believe a supply chain management construct on skill will be really helpful. So we are adopting the AP advanced planning and optimization methods of FMCG companies and automobile companies. So if you really want to transform your talent domain, you need to learn from other domain and implement it. Talent domain only can give linear or incremental. We want exponential change. You have to learn from other domain and use digital technology. That's what we are pushing.
And Alistair, for you, did you go big bang or pilot, and where did you create the hooks that really drove adoption?
Yeah. So I think the first thing to note, so with my role in people strategy, so we look at it ourselves as advisors to the HR organization. And what we'd seen previously with some of the options we'd taken before is that there's been silos of that skill information, right? So what we're trying to achieve with this is a consistent skill taxonomy to enable us to identify the skills of the workforce. I think in terms of getting that buy-in, what was really key was the governance around it. So what we did at Cisco is we set up a governance structure where we had accountable leaders from the various functions that we brought along the journey. So if we think about it as a skill-centered talent journey, so there's multiple use cases that are encompassed within that. So we've got hiring, so optimizing our hiring process. We've got performance management. We've got workforce planning. So there's all these use cases from different functions of the organization that come together. So we've worked with them to develop that skill-centered journey. So we brought them in at the start, and then we've gone after a specific use case to start with.
Sure. So there's been this sort of sense of bringing HR together as a seamless journey as part of the governance, and then taking that extra step of activating it in the business. And were there particular techniques that you used to really activate some of that adoption by the business owners more than the HR team? What sort of things helped in that journey?
So one thing to note, we haven't opened up the tool to employees more broadly, so we're still kind of using it to test various use cases. But I think the planning part up front and understanding the various use cases from each of the different functions, to try and bring those siloed informations together, understanding what are the outcomes that they want to drive for, and then encompassing that in that journey.
And I guess that's a huge change, because so frequently when we think about the employee experience, it still exists in the silo rather than viewing it as a continuous journey. So that must be a huge challenge to get people to even compromise within their silo. And Jan, for you, what's been your approach? I know you sort of started maybe with a bit more of a cautious pilot, and then you've gone big bang after. What chose you to go down those sorts of routes?
No, so we were looking for a way to kind of marry the interest in the organization with kind of learning about what we actually want. And so for us, sort of the concept of how do we provide more broader development opportunities and how do we learn about this AI sort of concept as an organization was part of it. And we've taken advantage of the fact that our sort of IS organization has been quite interested in exploring different solutions in the AI space. And we sort of brought them in and made a pilot. So we started with the implementation with 1,500 people across the globe in 3 specific parts of the business. One of them was IS, another one was HR, and the last one was our sort of internal consulting organization. And one of the things that sort of you can see in this is that, for us, sort of a little bit to what Shri was talking about, the IS organization and the sort of internal consulting organizations are the most kind of project-driven like organizations, right? So the places where they have shorter-term projects or engagements or objectives, so more suitable to kind of say, all right, I've got a 3-month engagement for 1 day a week where I need to develop a dashboard for a certain system, right, using Tableau, have at it, right? And that actually turned out to be a positive experience, and that allowed us to sort of put the pilot on fertile ground and get good learnings from it. And then based on that, we've launched out globally. We've just sort of finished our global launch in May. We went in 2 phases, starting with the most interested part of the organization, who were also interested in funding the expansion for us, and sort of launched in our commercial affiliates in the fall of last year as a phase 1, and then brought back the rest of the organization where we've also were able to take the time to deal with the change management related to offboarding some of our homegrown solutions for this, and bring everybody on the same sort of global platform. And so this was a process that really worked for us. The fact that we were working with a flexible solution sort of allowed us to separate the change management and the technology implementation to an extent, so we didn't have to worry about tech setup for each phase separately. We just sort of, once we had a green light from the pilot, we sort of implemented a broad access and broad solution with the full data flows, and focused on phasing out the change management aspect of it only.
And were there particular things that you changed between pilot and going live? Was there things that lessons learned that you thought, actually, that's not going to work, we try and do that again, or things that you did fresh that really was very successful?
Quite a few, actually, right? And most of them in the sort of change management space, right? So one of them was the point about what we were looking for was a very specific problem statement, and what we found in the pilot was that there were aspects of the platform that we knew that they were potentially valuable, but we didn't anticipate the level of interest that we've had. So what I'm talking specifically is we've pitched the pilot around, we'll post projects, you'll apply for them, and we'll give you a good development experience. There is a separate aspect of the platform where people can get guidance on how to navigate their career, and that had about the same amount of use. So that was much higher than what I expected, and that allowed us to then change the proposition, where now we really have a kind of three-part value proposition in the change management. One of them is talent for projects, projects for talent. Another one is this kind of get good advice around navigating your career, and the last one is connecting across skills. So that's one example of the learning. The other one was, because we focused on projects, we pushed on projects being posted at one time. So in the pilot, we had about sort of 70 projects for a 3-month period for 1,500 people, right? And what we realized was, one, that's a lot, right, for the organization to absorb. And two, if you push the organization to post projects, it will post projects. But they may not be equally committed to the projects actually playing out. And then you have a risk, right, where sort of if you post a project, it sounds really interesting, somebody applies for it, and the project owner doesn't respond. That's not a good experience, right, from the employee standpoint. And so we were able to adjust, where we now build more of a steady and consistent sort of flow, as opposed to big bang, lots of projects at one time and see what happens.
Another very interesting work we are doing is we learned a lot of lessons during War for Talent. We meant every candidate have 3-4 offers, they negotiate, renegotiate. Now we are working on an interesting concept called creating abundance. Earlier we worked on scarcity market, everybody go behind the same skill set and pay premium for that. So we are building around 7 to 8 use cases on theory of abundance using some of the AI engine like Eightfold. For example, if I hire a candidate in particular city, I have to pay premium, but if I go to a tier 2 cities, I can get 20% lower than the tier 1 city. Within India itself, Bangalore is called a tier 1. You go to south, Trivandrum is tier 2. So we are really doing a lot of research through AI engines. What are the skill availability in tier 2 cities? Second one is, if you want exact skill, you have to pay premium. So we are looking at adjacency skills, and can we hire people with adjacency skill and keep them through a boot camp and skill them into what you are looking at, then you are creating abundance. The third one is, earlier you want a 10 years experienced person, but can I afford to get it 5 years experienced person? Then you can create abundance. So we are working on skill taxonomy, or working on theory of abundance. So once you create abundance, you really can drive the cost down. You don't do that, you should have a data lake, very strong data integration of skills, compensation data, performance appraisal. One of our colleagues asked, 5 metrics we use for psychometric assessment. It's a gamified AI engine, and that data also available. What kind of people are successful, early attrition and analysis. So that's one thing we are looking at, having a solid data lake to converge all the dimensions of talent data, and can we create theory of abundance using various interventions.
So there's a real sense of trying to grow that skills base within your organization in the periphery to drive the future.
If I had to define one learning that I would encourage everyone here not to follow.
They're always the best, right? They're always the best.
It's, with Cisco, we had at the start, we had a clear implementation plan, clearly identified 4 phases of how that implementation was going to go. We implemented phase 1, and then, in true Cisco fashion, we did a 360, and, we started looking at how could we use some of that data, start doing like bespoke reporting, to accommodate some of the use cases that we wanted to push the boundaries on. what that resulted in is it was a learning curve for both us as well as Eightfold, and obviously it came up with issues in some of the data, some of the the technical implementation around that. What I think, and where Eightfold has come to the table now, is really pushing back on building upon that and encouraging us or advising us more to leverage a product in the way that it was intended to be used, rather than to try and use it to suit us.
So following sort of the best practice of what the solution can do, rather than trying to shoehorn it into maybe some legacy process, becomes a bit of a challenge. But I think it's interesting then, maybe for you guys to reflect a little bit also on the outcomes that you're already starting to see, even through the sort of journeys that you've started, whether that's through the engagement you're getting across teams or the results you're seeing for your people. Alistair, it'd be interesting maybe to get your sense of sort of the impacts you're already starting to see from your adoption of Eightfold, and what in learning you're taking away, which is helping you mobilize greater commitment, maybe within your immediate peers, but also across the organization as well.
Yeah, so I think as a result of kind of that pivot that we did, we're at a stage where we're resetting how we use the product. And the data that we've got from it, we're testing in various ways. So one of the, we have what we call Illuminate. So it's a quarterly focus, like 2-3 days on employee development across the whole of Cisco.
Cool.
So part of that, the last Illuminate last quarter was focused around skills. So there was a big push for employees to upload their resumes into our applicant tracking system so that we could ingest that skill data. So I think with the previous panel we talked about the data privacy. So there's a lot there. So we still need to build and earn that trust with the employees to feel comfortable to upload their resumes, get their skills inferred without impacting their roles. So I think we're at that stage at the moment.
But that sense of using it to leveraging development and personal growth and employability sounds like a really strong trigger to garner some of that engagement.
It is, and I think the other piece is also looking at how can we leverage the data that we're seeing from it, because we haven't opened it up to employees yet. It's how do we leverage that data to place people internally rather than let them go.
So you can almost create those halo effect, those great success stories that will draw other people to follow. Jan, what sort of things are you starting to see already in terms of some of the early results from your pilots, and now you're going big bang recently?
No, so echoing what Alistair was saying, right? The connecting the change and connecting the system sort of to something that the employees want or that the managers want gets you, and it sounds obvious, but it gets you better engagement. And so what we have seen is because sort of we were able to connect the implementation to a clear need that's coming from our listening, and we've been talking about that need, about our listening. The communications around launches have some of the best sort of open click-through read rates that we see sort of across the company all over. And we also see a very clear connection in terms of profiles being generated, connected to the communications that we send, right? And so what we've really tried to do is, rather than say, okay, here's a new solution, engage with it, we've tried to wait for the time in the year where sort of we are able to say, you're having a conversation about your career, here's where the platform can help you. Are you using it to get the most out of it? And this has a better sort of traction that we see, and we see a really good uptake in terms of user traffic, right? And we're able to watch it, and we see both that sort of it steadily sort of grows, and then what we see is that where we are able to connect with the needs, then we are seeing steep sort of bumps in engagement and user activity in the platform following the communication. So for us, it's a really good sort of experience so far, and we also like the fact that now sort of it's not a backroom process, right? There's a key initiative, and so we find out the names that are known, But you actually open it up, you have people able to sort of express their interest, you have the platform recommend people based on skills, and so it levels the playing field.
Yeah. But it's fascinating, that sense of bringing transparency
Yep.
through skills drives really good outcomes for the individual and the organisation.
Yeah.
But with for you, with being maybe a bit more commercially focused in your
Absolutely.
starting point, what challenges does that bring for you and what outputs you?
Yeah.
what
As I
outcomes you
mentioned,
see?
we implementing eightfold for skill supply chain,
Yeah.
the demand and supply. So 3 things we are targeting. One is how do you reduce the cost of delivery year over year, because we are working on a huge cost pressure on the solution. So we are expecting 5 to 7% reduction in cost of delivery through reskilling, cross-skilling, improving the utilization, scheduling. When a person moves up one project to another project, how do you ensure that there is no time lost?
Yes.
You complete today and get an assignment tomorrow. So we are focusing on how do you really improve the cost of delivery by scheduling, optimization, and everything. The second one, if you look at any professional services firm, 10 to 15% is a loss of revenue because of delay in fulfillment or non-fulfillment
Wow.
of the demands. That's a research conducted by McKinsey. So we want to really reduce the revenue loss because of delay in fulfillment and not fulfilling.
Yeah.
So we believe with coming of skill supply chain management, we can fulfill demands on time.
Yeah.
The third one is, as I mentioned, how do you really, EY is known for providing exceptional employee experience. So we want to ensure that through skilling program, we provide exceptional employee experience through reskilling, cross-skilling, promoting internally, rotating people between domain and sectors and everything. So once you get exceptional employee experience, we do a quarterly survey on exceptional employee experience, and we believe this experience will drive customer experience, and we can monetize customer experience in terms of repeatable business and not diluting the margins and everything. So we have a very economical value. We are closely monitoring that, and there are a lot of use cases we are building with Eightfold.
But it almost sounds as though no matter where you start, you end up with a virtuous circle which links back to greater productivity optimization, greater engagement, better skills building, and therefore a stronger pipeline to resource your disciplines. Now, I've asked lots of questions, but we've got an opportunity for you also to ask questions as well. So based on the experience and great expertise of the panel, it would be great to have your questions as well. So don't be shy. Please put your hands up. I've got some other questions here, but you've got a question right down the front, so it's a long way for you to run.
Hi, this is Peter from ASML. I was wondering, with the implementation of skills, did you take skills assessment from the start, and how was that accepted in the organization?
Yeah. Can you repeat it?
Oh,
If you took skills assessment from the start, so that, for example, the manager is rating how is the proficiency level of a certain skill.
Absolutely. So it's a very interesting learning we had. We use Eightfold for skill inference of employees. So you look at all our employee data and infer what is your current skill, because we have EY badges, the training program you attended, your experience on various projects, everything accumulate. Then we ask employees to load their resume into Eightfold. So from the resume, it infer your skills. So when I do roundtables on people who use this technology, Eightfold, I ask them, what is the accuracy of this inference using an AI engine? I was talking to Ashutosh. It ranges from 70 to 100%.
wow.
So that's the accuracy. They said, exactly this is who I am. Then we ask the manager. It have a proficiency level also. So they do the self-assessment, or system does the proficiency level first. Then you can fine-tune it. Then your manager can assess on the proficiency level of what you mentioned it. And also, like LinkedIn, your peers also give input, because it's visible to your peers also. They can say, hey, Sri is good in Six Sigma. I agree. His proficiency is very high. So it's a kind of a 360-degree view of your assessment. But so far, we have not come across, say, negative feeling from employees, somebody assessing mine. But so far, it's positive. But when the rubber meets the road of how do you use this for future assessment or assignment is where we need to see how people are going to react. When I select you over another person on the assessment, then person can say, no, I am better than other person. So far, so good. But I don't think big problem. But it's a good challenge organization need to face.
And from your experience with
No, for us,
assessments are not...
this is a question where we're really after balance, right? So because, I mean, there's a very easy way to make this into a huge administrative exercise, and sort of you are able to do it once, if that, and not sustain it, right? So we are trying to sort of go into and embrace this concept of, well, we're not going to do it through an instrument, we're going to do it through sort of inference, as Sri was talking about. And we are sort of working on learning from what that means for us. We have some parts of the organizations that are very comfortable with that approach. We have other parts of the organization that are very much not comfortable with that approach. And so we're trying to find out what the right balance is. I think the one key thing that I would say is, if you do skills assessment, if you work with this, be ready that you're not going to do it once.
Just to wrap it up,
Yeah,
yes.
just wrap it
So with at Cisco, we do use skill-based assessments as part of our hiring process for our technical roles, but that's not integrated into the 8-volt solution yet. It's kind of a roadmap item.
Yeah, sure. So thank you, our panelists.
Thank you, David.
Amazing insights. And it'd be really nice if you could thank them as well in the usual sort of way, because I think they're amazing.